The body of a man is found lying dead in the middle of Hollywood Boulevard, surrounded by the constant noise of tourists, celebrity impersonators, and lights that never seem to go out. Lisbon reports that the victim is a former state representative, which is more than enough reason for the CBI to take over the case immediately. Rigsby recognizes him as the husband of a once famous actress, making the case even more likely to attract media attention. Meanwhile, Jane calmly leans over the body with his usual unsettling composure and searches the victim's pockets. He quickly notices that there are no keys and no valet ticket, which is strange for someone who had gone out to dinner the night before and should, in theory, have parked his car somewhere nearby. The investigation first takes them to two street performers, a Charlie Chaplin impersonator and a Marilyn Monroe impersonator, both working in the exact area where the body was found. With his usual direct and mocking attitude, Jane manages to make them return the valet ticket they stole from the victim. Jane then sends them away without much ceremony, making it clear that the little trick was nothing more than a distraction to confirm what he already suspected. Following the ticket's trail, the team locates the victim's car. When they open the trunk, they discover a huge amount of drugs, enough to raise every possible question about a secret double life that no one seemed to know existed. The discovery completely changes the profile of the dead man and opens the door to a network of possible connections to the criminal world, something nobody expected from a former politician with such a spotless public reputation. Lisbon and Jane then travel to Poseidon Studios in Burbank, where a movie financed by the victim is being filmed. There, they speak with the director, Gabriel Fanning, who explains that he had dinner with Felix Hansen the night before. Hansen was investing $10 million in the production, an enormous amount of money that made him the key figure behind the entire project. His wife, Felicia Scott, was also the star of the film. Gabriel insists that the dinner went perfectly, but Jane immediately notices something that does not add up. The director mentions that they split the bill, something that makes little sense when one of the men at the table had just invested millions of dollars in his movie. The contradiction leaves the distinct impression that Gabriel is hiding something important. Meanwhile, Van Pelt traces the last number Hansen called from his phone and discovers that it belongs to Freddie Ross, a convicted criminal who now makes a living appearing in commercials. The combination is suspicious enough to raise even more questions and expands the list of shady connections surrounding the case. Lisbon and Jane meet with Felicia Scott and Sydney, Hansen's teenage daughter, who is actually his stepdaughter. They learn that Felicia had spent the weekend at a spa, far away from the city. Jane carefully watches every gesture she makes and asks what first attracted her to her husband. His question makes it obvious that Felix did not seem like her type, suggesting that she had always been fascinated by troubled men. Felicia firmly denies it and defends her husband's spotless image, insisting that he would never have become involved with drugs. Sydney, uncomfortable and defensive, also insists that she knows nothing about the contents of the trunk, but when she moves to answer her phone, a photograph of a young man slips from her belongings. Jane notices it immediately and stores the image in his memory as another important piece of the puzzle. Their conversation is interrupted when they are called back to the set. Filming cannot be stopped because of requirements imposed by the insurance company, forcing Felicia to return to work with Sydney, who has a small role with a few lines. During the trip, the young girl lets slip that her father had been unhappy with the script and had threatened to withdraw his financial support. Felicia quickly minimizes the situation, presenting it as nothing more than a temporary disagreement. Jane takes advantage of a moment alone with Sydney and asks her about the young man in the photograph. She eventually admits that his name is Brandon Fulton and that their relationship is difficult to define, somewhere between an intense friendship and a secret romance. It is enough to concern any protective father. The tension hangs in the air as filming continues, while each new piece slowly begins to fit into a much darker puzzle, one filled with Hollywood glamour, jealousy, ambition, secrets, and far more lies than anyone expected. Rigsby and Cho locate Freddie Ross at a cheap motel, one of those places where the walls seem to hold more secrets than memories. But when they knock on his door, there is no answer, so they decide to wait. When Ross finally returns and sees them, he immediately takes off running without looking back. His reaction confirms their suspicions, and although he manages to escape, Cho gets a clear look at his license plate, leaving the chase open for later. Back at the set, Lisbon and Jane are intercepted by Mitch Kavanaugh, Gabriel's agent. Mitch is aggressive, nervous, and extremely protective of his client, and he tries to prevent them from getting anywhere near Gabriel. But Jane uses his usual ability to disarm people, digging into Mitch's insecurities and talking about his school days and how difficult it must be to constantly live in someone else's shadow. Eventually, Jane gets under his skin enough that Mitch, frustrated and emotionally shaken, finally lets them through. Inside the trailer, Lisbon catches Gabriel taking pills. After pressuring him, he finally admits that Hansen told him the night before that he intended to pull his financial support. If that happened, the entire movie would have collapsed. Gabriel does not confess to any crime, but it is clear that the death of his investor was, at the very least, convenient for him. Even so, he is arrested for drug possession, although Mitch takes responsibility and agrees to handle the legal consequences, reinforcing the feeling that both men are hiding something deeper. Filming continues under an increasingly tense atmosphere. Felicia prepares to shoot a scene in front of a flower shop, speaking on the phone while Sydney delivers her lines from off-camera. Felicia stops the filming several times, criticizing the girl's performance and demanding more commitment from her. Sydney watches awkwardly as her stepmother kisses another actor during the scene and then tries to change the script, arguing with Gabriel and revealing just how controlling she can be. During a break, Sydney walks away from the set visibly upset, climbs into a golf cart, and drives off. Jane follows her from a distance, trying to talk to her, but she refuses to open up. At the same time, Cho puts pressure on Mitch, warning him that his legal situation could become much worse if he refuses to cooperate. Eventually, Mitch admits that he does not know who killed Hansen, but he can lead them to Freddie Ross, the drug dealer who supplied the drugs. The trail takes them to a crowded house party filled with young people, loud music, and excess. Cho, Rigsby, and Van Pelt find both Ross and Sydney there, confirming that the girl is moving in circles far more dangerous than she lets on. Ross explains that Hansen had called him and ordered him to stay away from his 16-year-old daughter. He also knew about Sydney's boyfriend, who regularly bought drugs from him. It becomes clear that Hansen had been trying to stop a chain of bad decisions before things went too far. Lisbon and Jane confront Sydney with this information. Lisbon suspects that the drugs found in the car actually belonged to the young girl. Jane, meanwhile, reflects aloud on the attraction many people feel toward troubled boys. Sydney eventually admits that she needed money, that she had taken pills and a gun from the house, and that Brandon, who was 19, had been selling them for her. However, she insists that she did not talk to him nearly as often as the phone records suggest. With the situation closing in around her, Felicia finally admits that the stolen weapon was a .45 caliber pistol. Lisbon then reveals that the exact same caliber was used to kill her husband. For a brief moment, Felicia's composure visibly cracks. Although she admits that she knew the drugs belonged to Sydney, she immediately begins manipulating the situation. She creates a performance of disappointment and false maternal concern when Jane mentions the constant calls from Brandon. She even manages to get Lisbon to assure her that no charges will be filed against the girl. Jane watches the entire performance with a mixture of irony and fascination, convinced that Felicia has mastered the art of deception better than many professional actors. As they leave, Jane predicts that Brandon Fulton will not be able to resist the temptation to visit the Hansen house that very night. His prediction leads to a quiet surveillance operation. Rigsby and Cho take positions outside the property, watching carefully and waiting for the trap to close by itself. That same night, the Hansen house sits in tense silence, interrupted only by the distant sound of traffic. Rigsby and Cho remain in their car, watching every shadow moving between the trees and every reflection appearing in the windows. After several hours, Brandon Fulton finally arrives. He approaches the house nervously, takes out a set of keys that do not belong to him, and quietly lets himself inside, confirming once again that Jane was right. The moment they see him cross the doorway, the agents rush toward the house. But before they can intervene, gunshots suddenly ring out from inside, followed by Felicia's desperate scream for help in the darkness. When they enter, they find Brandon wounded, still holding a .45 caliber pistol in his hand. Felicia is trembling nearby, surrounded by a scene that seems almost perfectly designed to inspire sympathy. Paramedics arrive quickly and take the young man away, while the team tries to reconstruct the chaotic seconds that have just passed. They know that nothing in that house happened by accident, and that every movement may have been carefully calculated. Not long afterward, while Felicia is trying on a dress for the next stage of filming, Lisbon tells her that, for the moment, no charges will be filed against her, and assures her that Brandon will survive. Felicia pretends to be deeply relieved, but Jane watches every micro-expression and every uneven breath. Then he reveals that the weapon Brandon was carrying is the same gun used to kill Felix. He casually adds that Sydney could be charged as an accomplice for stealing the pistol. At those words, Felicia's expression changes ever so slightly, and Jane immediately realizes that the truth is much closer than she appears to believe. Brandon, still dazed and recovering from his injuries, is questioned by Cho and Rigsby. They try to understand why he entered the house armed. Confused and in pain, Brandon believes that they were the ones who shot him. He only says that Felix was a monster who enjoyed making other people suffer, but he refuses to explain anything further, as though something more powerful than himself is preventing him from telling the truth. Back at the office, the team analyzes the situation and realizes they need a confession. The gun alone is not enough to prove who actually planned the murder. That is when Jane decides to use his specialty: psychological games, human behavior, and a carefully constructed performance. He talks to Sydney, who tearfully insists that she never asked Brandon to kill her father. Jane gently suggests that perhaps someone else pushed Brandon into doing it. The idea begins to take root in her mind, creating a doubt she can no longer easily ignore. With everything prepared, Jane suggests that Felicia and Sydney return to the set and continue filming. He is convinced that the environment, filled with lights, cameras, and watching eyes, is the perfect stage for the truth to finally emerge. He wants to see the final performance, the great act that will bring the entire deception to an end. Gabriel welcomes them back and tells them to start from the beginning. He encourages everyone to relax and not worry too much about sticking to the script, while giving Jane a knowing look. As the filming begins, Sydney finally breaks the silence and accuses her stepmother of seducing Brandon and deliberately lying to him. In front of the shocked crew, actors, and extras, Felicia tries to deny everything, but her performance is forced, stiff, and exaggerated. Jane immediately sees through it. He stops the scene and points out that her tone sounds false and mechanical, completely lacking any sense of truth. Then, in front of everyone, he begins reconstructing the entire story. Jane explains how Felicia manipulated Brandon. First, she seduced him. Then she convinced him that Felix was abusing and suffocating her, feeding Brandon's anger and his desire to protect her. Little by little, she pushed him toward violence until he became the perfect instrument for her revenge. Jane makes it clear that Felicia's career depends on her ability to convince everyone that she is telling the truth. But this time, there is no script that can save her. Cornered at last, Felicia breaks down and confesses. She explains that she was furious because Felix had decided to withdraw his financial support after their disagreements over the script. She felt that he was destroying her career and ruining her life. His constant control made her feel trapped, and eventually she began seeing him as an enemy. She admits that she used Brandon, drawing him in and manipulating him emotionally until he became exactly what she needed, someone willing to carry out her revenge. In a final reconstruction, the truth is revealed. One night, while reading the script at home with a drink in her hand, Felicia pretended to be a helpless victim. She seduced the young man and completely reversed the story she would later tell everyone else. Brandon, blinded by his feelings for her and consumed by anger, fell for the deception. Felicia convinced him that Felix was the source of all her suffering, and Brandon eventually tricked Felix into leaving the house and heading toward Hollywood Boulevard, where death was waiting for him. Sydney listens to her stepmother's confession with tears in her eyes. Felicia tries to justify herself, claiming that if Felix had understood what she needed, none of this would have happened. Jane coldly cuts her off. Manipulation and selfishness are not love, they are destruction. Before being arrested, Felicia asks Jane to tell Sydney that she is sorry. She admits that she was never the stepmother she could have been, leaving behind a career, a family, and a life built entirely on lies. And so, among the fading lights, motionless cameras, and a film set slowly returning to silence, the case finally comes to an end. The truth has been exposed. Behind the glamour of Hollywood, the cameras, and the carefully constructed performances, a murder was born from jealousy, ambition, manipulation, and revenge. And in a place where almost everything is fiction, Patrick Jane proves once again that the truth always finds its moment to step into the light. If you enjoyed this episode, don't stop here. Head over to my channel and check out the complete playlist of The Mentalist, with every episode organized in order from beginning to end. Watch the full series, follow Patrick Jane's journey, and discover all the hidden details, mysteries, and secrets along the way. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more The Mentalist episodes, breakdowns, and stories.